excited to spend some time with you today talking about something I guess you're probably also interested in if you're here, and that is kind of how do we make the most of this thing that we spend so much of our lives doing, work, right? When you really add it up and think about just your awake time, you spend a lot of your time with these people that you're assigned to be friends with. You may not have chosen to be best friends with some of your coworkers or spend so much time with them. You get to in other areas of your life a little bit more select that, right? We pick our friends and partners and things like that, but our coworkers sometimes we're just kind of like, hey, you two work together and make this whole team work together and get along and do really important and difficult things sometimes. So it can be a challenge, but it can also be very rewarding. So I'm going to want to hear from you. And as Heather said, if you want to keep your camera off, if you want to stay anonymous, you're welcome to turn it on if you want to engage as well as long as you know it's recorded. Um, but I'd love to get your comments in chat. I'm one who likes to get a lot of feedback about this topic and get your thoughts on it. So those that want to, I'd love to see you kind of type away some of your thoughts and I'll read those. But I want to start with a question on this topic that why did you take this job? And I'd love to see you just say, my name is Joe and I'm an engineer and this is why. And anybody wants to just kind of share that, they can. You don't even have to share your name. You can just share what you do and why you took that job. I'm interested to hear the reasons you chose this career that you found yourself in. And some of you have been doing it for a long time. Others have just kind of gotten started. But I'd love to hear, why did you take this job? One of you said a contact, so somebody knows that they love the company, their position. Okay, so that's good. Some of you through networking, you just heard good things about it. Megan says, I'm a kindergarten teacher. I love the purpose, and I find in teaching littles. Now, Megan, I have a lot of respect for that. I used to be kind of an associate kindergarten teacher when I was going through school, and I loved it. I was exhausted every time I went home, but I loved it. And it was my daughter who's doing the same thing now. She did that for a kindergarten. In the school year, it was just brutal for her. She just cried and she was sad because those kids were going to move on. And I know there's nothing better than teaching those littles. So important work. Uh, I love meeting people at their level to help understand technology. Good. Maybe is this an IT person? Maybe saying that they're helping people understand technology, or is that teaching? I don't know. Writer, editor, starting this field because I'm good at it. That's a good input, right? Sometimes it's like chicken or the egg thing, right? Do I like something? Am I good at something because I like it, or do I like it because I'm good at it? Could be either or both. Landscape architect we have in here in the public sector probably was too stressful. So I'm seeing already that some of you really found your niche, right? And some of that's personal. Like I see that one of them had to do with benefits and savings and vacation. Okay. Others are more specifically about the benefits of the work you do. And all those reasons are very legitimate. But I want you to think about now why you took this career, this job. What were those positive motivations? And then why do you do it now? And think back. I don't know how long you've been doing this, but I talked to my kindergarten teacher. You know, I've seen teachers who've done it for a long time, and some who still love the children. Others are like, I'm struggling, right? This is true for all these jobs. Why do you do it now? Now why are you still here? Does it look kind of like this for you sometimes? What you see on your screen? Does it feel like you've fallen out of love? And I'm going to use that analogy that might be a little bit weird for you, but your work is a relationship. I mean, the people you work with are relationships, but your job itself is a relationship. And just like your marriage or your friendships, you have to nurture them. You may have fallen in love easily. Maybe you had so much in common. You were good at what you did. You loved what it offered, the lifestyle, the hours, the pay, the challenges, that way it fits your strengths, and you feel like you're contributing to good things. All these things I see rolling in. I love it that you guys are talking about as to why you do what you do. but do you still feel that magic, right? Do you feel that magic? And sometimes I see people with that magic fades. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I see the magic fade in relationships. And sometimes people decide, well, I guess we've grown apart and we're going to move on. And sometimes they do. And sometimes that's the right decision for them based on their circumstance. But sometimes it just means you just need to just work on the relationship and fall back in love. And we can do that with our jobs because we could skip to a new job, but we might find out that we're going to fall out of love with that one too. So if you're here today, I'm guessing it's either just because you love just the concept of seminars and love to learn everything you can, or maybe you're just a little bit yourself wondering, how can I or myself, or how can I help other people fall in love with what they do again and really get the most out of it? Make this 8 hours a day that we spend on average, right? The just meaningful and valuable. And so I look forward to going to work and it makes me a better person when I come home. I come home happy because if you don't love your job, right? If you don't love what you do when you're there, everyone at home pays for it, right? They hear the complaining and there's sort of like the after effect of how it's impacting you and you bring that home. And so the secret to all of this in terms of being happy at your job and in life is not going to be a surprise. And it comes down to a choice. And I would actually say it's not a choice, it's choices made over and over again. And I know that sounds overly simplified, and it is overly simplified because you don't get to just choose to be happy in any given moment. Life happens, and it would be really unrealistic to always be happy. But it is realistic to continue to choose things that get us on that path and that will make us our very best version of ourselves that day and tackling what we do. So it starts with the little choices we make all the time. And Leo Buscaglia said, we call the secret of happiness is no more a secret than our willingness to choose life. So, and Abraham Lincoln said, whatever you are, be a good one. And I like how someone, couple of you alluded to that. I do what I do because I'm good at it. And I find that's why I chose what I do. I remember when I was young and people would struggle and I'd talk with them and they're like, that was helpful. I appreciate that. You should make a living out of helping people through their hard times. Well, maybe I will. I think that's how sometimes we kind of get directed in the directions that we choose. But if you are struggling with your job, maybe that's one of the avenues to improve, or to enjoy it more, is to improve at it, get better at it, right? Like, uh, um, we can always improve in what we do. Whether you're an attorney, as I see here, or a custodial supervisor, or benefits person, I see, and all the different jobs I'm looking at here, architects, get better at it, study, get training. The second, just like in a relationship, I keep using that analogy, you get stale, then it just kind of goes bad. Like you're think about your job and relationships are an uphill climb and you don't get a brake pedal, you only get the gas. So if you're not hitting the gas, you're rolling backwards. So just keep your foot on the gas and keep growing and study your craft and be the best at it. So think about the ways. I would challenge you to think about ways you can get better at what you do that will help you enjoy your job more. Often we see a lot of studies and have shown when both in terms of relational dissatisfaction as well as job satisfaction, that when you ask them after they divorced or left their job, how would they change their mind? Many said, if I'd have known what I know now, I would have stuck it out and tried to make it work there. Some don't, but that's something you have to really weigh. And don't let the emotion of this moment, like I hate this thing about my job, or I hate what's going on with my job right now, or my relationship, like be my only truth. Like I really need to weigh everything. Yes, I feel this now, but I also know that I love this about my job and that'll come and this has been here. And you can really make a decision based on the whole picture. And again, finding the value in what you do. And that's sometimes what's easy to forget, right? Is what's the outcome? What are you really contributing? What are you doing? It'd be nice if we all had that moment, like in the Miracle on, what is it called? Miracle on, it's the Christmas one, right? Where 7th Street or something, I'm forgetting what it's called. It's the one where he Uh, 34th, thank you. Miracle on 34th Street. I'm like, what street was he on in New York? Uh, uh, we got to see what happens if if he wasn't around, right? And I think maybe if we could contemplate ourselves a little bit, without my contribution, how would this company do? What does my contribution mean? Someone said, I think the culture in the companies I've worked for played a huge part, whether or not like bunch of ding ding Pam, we're going to talk about that. That is a huge, actually, you know what you're saying there, Pam, is actually proven to be the number one factor, not only just an important factor, but when you ask people why you keep a job, why you like your job, and find out what makes those happy jobs work. The number one factor is that they felt like that the company culture was more important than what they did. So in other words, I'll be a little bit more clear about that. When they did a poll and studied job satisfaction, they looked at it and they said early in your career, like the first couple of years, let's say you're a kindergarten teacher, and they said, what made you what makes you the happiest in people in their job? And they found it's that they're doing what they love. And you say, why am I happy in my job? It's because I love teaching children. That's what the kindergartner would say. I love the ways that they learn, and by the end of the year, they know all this stuff, and I get the interactions. I love that. Um, and that's true. But then when you ask a little bit later in their career, you say, what if you're happy at work, what makes you happy? People will say, it's because I work at a good company culture. It becomes a little less important what they do in terms of their well-being and their happiness, and more important, the culture they do it in. So do I have support from the principals and the other teachers and the parents? And do I have a good system in place to help this be a really good culture I work in? And of course, the kids in that case create the culture too every day. But it's that culture. And so what's the part we play in that? It's easy to say, well, that's up to my company, right? Don't you guys feel that a little bit? The culture is up to my company. Blomquist Hill decides, Dave Blomquist and Brent Hill. Or in your case, it might be you work for a company and you think it's your CEO, your direct supervisor, and that's true. But in a lot of ways, we also can create that culture ourselves. I think of an experience I had where not too long ago, we had a neighbor that was new in our neighborhood and came to our door with cookies. Now we're a little bit embarrassed because, like, that's our job. What are you doing? We're supposed to bring you cookies. You're new in the neighborhood. But they were like, we just kind of want to get to know some of our neighbors. We just moved in, want to introduce ourselves. Now, I imagine they might have thought those people that live next door to us or across the street aren't very friendly. They didn't come by and welcome us to the neighborhood. And this neighborhood's not very friendly. This is not a friendly neighborhood culture. It'd be easy for them to assume that about us because and it's true, we didn't come by and bring them cookies and introduce ourselves. We were distracted and being, I guess, not very thoughtful. But when they came by and we had a good interaction, they were able to see, okay, they're nice people. They just didn't take that step, and that what they made that happen, right? They helped create that culture. You have that opportunity where you work. Yeah, you don't get to make the big decisions about, are we going to have a company party here or there? Maybe you can help participate in those discussions, but you certainly can do things like create those water cooler moments and even innovate and talk about with, hey, are we all going to go out for pizza after the meeting, and creating just even in smaller ways that company culture. We are all a part of that. A great video you can find on YouTube is called The First Follower, the shirtless guy. I know that sounds weird, but it's like just rough footage of a guy at a concert and how he is, like, as the first follower, just finds a good idea and jumps on board and creates this movement. And how we can just be good followers. And that's leadership, really, when we just find good ideas, see good things happening, build on it, and say, I like that, and do recognition and things. You don't have to wait for the company to do a formal recognition of an employee of the month to create a good culture. You can do a shout out to your coworkers. So those are ways that we can help create and contribute to the company culture. So being good at your job, helping build the culture, finding value in what you do, right? Really seeing how important it is. And then if you're only doing it for the money, your happiness will only be on payday. Studies show that a majority of people would take a $5,000 pay cut if their company culture was a little bit better and they felt a little happier in other ways. I'm not suggesting any of you go ask your boss for a $5,000 pay cut, but it goes to show we would give up a little bit of money if it would help uh, create a better work experience. So we have to kind of think about, by the way, how do we create value for others? Because that will, if you believe in karma and just goodness, that comes back to you. So what resources do you have to take that to a higher level? When you think about that, resources. Can tell the story, speaking of school and my kindergarten teacher. Now I've got kindergarten on my mind now because she was the first to chime up. I remember when I was teaching that class, well, I was assistant and I was, helping. I remember one day we're standing in line for lunch. And this particular day, it seemed like it was moving pretty slow. And as you know, if you've been a teacher or you work with children, like it feels like you need things to kind of move pretty well, or it can be chaos, right? Um, so I remember this day, a little frustration on my part that the line was moving slow and thinking these kids are standing in this line and we're not really wasn't being very efficient. And then I watched in front of me develop. These kids decided, because we were standing on this long line waiting and not moving, that the black tiles would be lava and the white tiles were going to be the ground. And you've all played this game. You probably all remember a version of it from your childhood. And that standing in line became a really fun activity. The resources available to children were something that most adults don't even think about, which was what color is the floor, right? And what can we do with that? And so that creativity, that imagination, that ability to say, what's available to me to make this a good experience? I'd encourage us all to think about that and what ways can we just kind of look a little bit more closely at what's available to us to take that higher. And I would love to hear the resources in terms of, now when I think broad, when I think of resources, resources can be things like just trainings that are offered to you, funding that's provided, but it also can be things that are more intangible, like your own willingness and your own ability. A resource can be an internal resource, like my imagination, as you see on the screen there, or my my caring attitude towards my coworkers. So, anybody you can chime in. What resources do you have to take your job to a higher level? And then just kind of, as I said before, when it comes to this relationship you have with your job, you got to keep reinventing yourself, keep it fresh, right? Find a new way to do that thing. It's really to get stuck in a rut. Like I check my emails, I do this, I do this, I do that. And that can be very effective and helpful and it can get us through, make our jobs more streamlined and it's simple. But sometimes you know what you got to do? You got to flip it around and just say, I'm going to do things a little differently. I'm going to change the background of my Outlook calendar so it's not the white screen, it's the black one. Woohoo, right? Like mix it up, do something different, change your office setting. This is what we encourage people to do in relationships. Get spicy and go have fun and do something different. You can do that with your job a little bit too. So sometimes we need to recognize that we will burn ourselves and others out if we aren't careful. Burnout is a real thing. And so we want to avoid that by some of these things that we're talking about. Making each day your masterpiece, as it says there. So what can you add to your job? Again, enjoyment. What can you do to add a little enjoyment to another's day? I encourage you to all to, and you're going to see here in a minute, we're going to talk more about this, but I like to, find a person in your network every day to send some random compliment. Just think of something nice and send it to in your network and just say, hey, I noticed this. Notice the boost you'll get from that, not just them, from finding ways to lift people that way and then again, enthusiasm and of course, humor, finding the humor in what we do. Mark Sanborn's written a lot on this topic that we're talking about right now. And he said, a sad employee left his job of many years. Most days he worked were like the day before. He wasn't disliked by colleagues, but he won't be missed. And while he made good money, he felt quite poor. He always did what he was paid to do and nothing more. And he did without having any fun. He performed his job the way he lived his life. He did it the way it had always been done. So that's just a little bit more of a testimonial to the importance of trying to just mix it up and just find a new way to do things. And not only will you make it more interesting for you, it could also help you invent new, better ways of doing things, right? Like we can find the very fact that we're doing this right now, this Zoom meeting, in a lot of ways was it was on its way, right? We were already there. I remember when Zoom, this platform, we heard about it. I don't know how many years ago now, but it was prior to COVID, and I wish I thought of Zoom. I don't know how many of you are my age, but I thought of that oatmeal stuff we used to eat when we were kids called Zoom. My parents made me eat, and I'm like, Zoom, what's this? Like, it's a video platform for doing therapy. We're gonna do therapy on video. I'm like, we're gonna do what now? Right. You can't do that. I need to see your kneecaps to help you. Like we gotta be in the same room. And we had a lot of pushback. I was trying to be forward thinking, like, hey, Margaret loved the Zoom cereal. I grew to love it. It was an acquired taste. I preferred the cream of wheat, but I developed a like for Zoom. But I wish I had stock in Zoom, the platform, not the cereal, because that's probably not doing as well. But but this platform is doing really well. And I wish I'd bought stock in it when it was we were introduced to us. But then COVID came along, right? We were having some resistance. Our clients didn't necessarily sign up for it. Very little. Like we were not getting very many people who wanted to do it. And our therapists didn't like it. We only got a few who were willing to do it because they just thought it was going to be the wrong way to do things. And then this thing happened in 2020. We had COVID. And it really forced us down that technological path further, right? Because it was the only way to do it for a little while. And now it's still about a third of what we do. And it's still a very vibrant, effective way to do things. And these meetings, I think we're already starting to do stuff like this before that, but it certainly took off and it was pushed. And my point with that is sometimes it takes a difficult thing to push you in a new direction, right? They say that the mother of invention is necessity, right? And like sometimes like you have to find a better way to do things. Well, we can create that without a crisis, I think. And it's better if we do, right? We can sometimes find reasons to see that it could be better. But say, or they say that the enemy to great is good. So don't settle for good and look for something great. Um, again, making a difference, and that's one of the ways that we're going to find value and make our jobs meaningful. It starts with your attitude. Your parents were right when they kept telling you that when you were a kid. Change your attitude. Um, and because it's true that just the orientation of our mind towards an object, that's an attitude. Like the ways that we focus and change and the set of thought patterns that we apply to that thing is our attitude, and we get to choose that. As an example, I can say to myself when I fail at something at work, or I feel like I fail, I could say, I am no good at this. I'm not good at that. Or I can say, I'm not good at this yet. Or I actually am good at it in some ways, and here's where I'm good at it, and here's where I need to improve. But these really like unhealthy cognitive thinking errors where we just all or nothing ourselves, or should ourselves, or blame, or create this narrow focus on the negative and weed out the positive. All these kind of thinking errors can get in the way of our best selves, and we just drag ourselves down. And then the next one's do things for the right reason, right? Finding if we're only doing it for recognition and praise, you often be disappointed, right? If it's when we can see the true value of something, we see what it does, that we're going to get the true reward, right? And that's going to be deeper. Some points to remember: kind of be real, be your best version of yourself. Don't try to be sometimes the problem that we see why people struggle to find their best self at work and enjoy their job is because they're always trying to live up to somebody else and what they are. And they were so good at what they do. Think about your favorite leader, and you may love things about them, but they may not be your personality, right? And that's okay. Like you can try your best to glean from that person the best you can, their strengths, find your own and develop those and be real and be yourself. Be interested and be interested. It was said that you can go a lot further in a shorter period of time by taking an interest in other people than you can waste all that time trying to get them interested in you. It takes a long time to get people like you and gravitate towards you and feel that feeling of their validation, if you want to put it that way, by trying to be interesting. It's a shortcut to be interested, to take interest in them, Tell this to your kids. It's a great gift. It's a great tool in developing friendships in school and in those ages is try a little bit, don't try quite as hard to be interesting. Try just be interested. And I promise you that'll go a long ways because everyone loves it when you're interested in them. You laugh at their jokes is way more valuable than being funny, right? Because people love it. It makes them feel good about themselves. So that's the premise, as Megan said, how to win friends and influence people. Just taking a genuine interest. And then we gain from that because the very act of being interested in somebody gets us out of our own skin, our own misery. And I know this is a fine balance because one of the things we sometimes have to do when we're unhappy or depressed or struggling is to sort of rally and take good care of ourselves, called self-care. And I'm a believer in that. But also, I think there's a balance here because sometimes we get too focused and we call it navel gazing, where you're so focused on your own hurt and pain and problems. I have not seen that really work. It might be a relief factor, like I feel less burdened, but I don't feel any happier. And so I've got to really find a way to say, keep that balance. Yes, I do need to take care of me because without me being my best, I have nothing to give. But my real focus can sometimes just be I get to do that for a living. I get to focus on other people. By very definition, if you come in to see me as a counselor, I'm not going to talk about myself very much. I shouldn't. And I'm going to be talking about you, what's going on in your life. And I've seen my own problems kind of melt away and just my own concerns just by the end of the day, I feel lighter because I'm not worried about myself. I'm focused on somebody else. I can still feel pain. I can still feel hurt, but I'm feeling yours. There's something about that that makes me feel less burdened when I can take on somebody else's. So I think there's real value in being empathic, listening to other people and being interested in them. And of course, just being the best person you can be. It's hard to enjoy your job if you're being dishonest, if you're afraid to you might get in trouble for something that's kind of hanging over you, or you just know you're violating your own ethics, and you're not being a team player. So just be good, be prompt in those things. So I'm going to turn to this video here. This will take a few minutes. I think it's maybe even a 10 or 11 minute video. And maybe some of you have heard this guy before, but you can find him on TED Talks or on YouTube. So I'm Sean Aker, I believe is how he pronounces his name. And kind of like me, he talks kind of fast. I notice I do that too sometimes. But he's got a lot to offer in this video. And I think it's really good. It's called Happy Secret to Better Work. So I'm going to go ahead and play that for you. And then I'm just going to need someone to give me a thumbs up or something that you can hear this. So I'll go ahead and hit play. Can someone tell me, can you hear that audio coming through? No? Uh-oh. Okay. All right.
When I was 7 years old and my sister
You can hear it, Derek.
was just
You can
5
hear
years
it.
old,
You can hear it now?
we were
Okay.
playing on top of a bunk bed. I was 2 years older than my sister at the time. I mean, I'm 2 years older than her now, but at the time that meant she had to do everything that I wanted to do, and I wanted to play war. So we were up on top of our bunk beds, and on one side of the bunk bed, I had put out all my GI Joe soldiers and weaponry, and on the other side were all my sister's Milos and ponies and ready for a cavalry charge. There are differing accounts of what actually happened that afternoon, but since my sister is not here with us today, let me tell you the true story. Which is my sister is a little bit on the clumsy side. And somehow, without any help or push from her older brother at all, suddenly Amy disappeared off at the top of the bunk bed and landed with this crash on the floor. And I nervously peered over the side of the bed to see what had befallen my fallen sister and saw that she had landed painfully on her hands and knees on all fours on the ground. I was nervous because my parents had charged me with making sure that my sister and I played as safely and as quietly as possible. And seeing as how I had accidentally broken Amy's arm just 1 week before, heroically pushing her out of the way of an oncoming imaginary sniper bullet, for which I have yet to be thanked. I was trying as hard as I could. She didn't even see it coming. I was trying as hard as I could to be on my best behavior, and I saw my sister's face this wail of pain and suffering and surprise, threatening to erupt from her mouth and threatening to wake my parents from the long winter's nap for which they had settled. So I did the only thing my little frantic 7-year-old brain could think to do to avert this tragedy. If you have children, you've seen this hundreds of times before. I said, Amy, wait, don't cry, don't cry. Did you see how you landed? No human lands on all fours like that. Amy, I think this means you're a unicorn. Now that was cheating because there's nothing in the world my sister would want more than not to be Amy, the hurt 5-year-old little sister, but Amy, the special unicorn. Of course, this was an option that was open to her brain at no point in the past. And you could see on my poor, manipulated sister's face conflict. As her little brain attempted to devote resources to feeling the pain and suffering surprise she just experienced, or contemplating her newfound identity as a unicorn. And the latter won out. Instead of crying, instead of ceasing our play, instead of waking my parents with all the negative consequences that would have ensued for me, instead, a smile spread across her face, and she scrambled right back up onto the bunk bed with all the grace of a baby unicorn with one broken leg. What we stumbled across at this tender age of just 5 and 7, we had no idea at the time, was something that was going to be at the vanguard of a scientific revolution occurring 2 decades later in the way that we look at the human brain. What we had stumbled across is something called positive psychology, which is the reason that I'm here today and the reason that I wake up every morning. When I first started talking about this research outside of academia, out with companies and schools, the very first thing they said to never do is to start your talk with a graph. The very first thing I wanted to do is start my talk with a graph. This graph looks boring, but this graph is the reason that I get excited and wake up every morning. And this graph doesn't even mean anything. It's fake data. What we found is,
Are you a Rocky Mountain Power customer?
We had
How would you
commercial.
like to get paid to put a backup battery in your home?
if I got this data back sitting you here in the room, I would be thrilled because there's very clearly a trend that's going on there, and that means that I can get published, which is all that really matters. The fact that there's one weird red dot that's up above the curve, there's one weird in the room, you know who you are, I saw you earlier. That's no problem. That's no problem, as most of you know, because I can just delete that dot. I can delete that dot because that's clearly a measurement error, and we know that's a measurement error because it's messing up my data. So one of the very first things that we teach people in economics and statistics and business and psychology courses is how, in a statistically valid way, do we eliminate the weirdos? How do we eliminate the outliers? So that we can find the line of best fit, which is fantastic if I'm trying to find out how many Advil the average person should be taking, too. But if I'm interested in potential, if I'm interested in your potential or for happiness or productivity or energy or creativity, what we're doing is we're creating the cult of the average with science. If I ask a question like how fast can a child learn how to read in a classroom, scientists change the answer to how fast does the average child learn how to read in that classroom? And then we tailor the class right towards the average. Now, if you fall below the average on this curve, then psychologists get thrilled, because that means you're either depressed or you have a disorder or hopefully both. We're hoping for both because our business model is if you come into a therapy session with one problem, we want to make sure you leave knowing you have 10. So you'll keep coming back over and over again. We'll go back into your childhood if necessary, but eventually what we want to do is make you normal again. But normal is merely average. And what I posit and what positive psychology posits is that if we study what is merely average, we will remain merely average. That instead of deleting those positive outliers, what I intentionally do is come into a population like this one and says, why? Why is it that some of you are so high above the curve in terms of your intellectual ability, athletic ability, musical ability, creativity, energy levels, your resiliency in the face of challenge, your sense of humor, whatever it is, instead of deleting you, what I want to do is study you. Because maybe we can glean information, not just how to move people up to the average, but how we can move the entire average up at our companies and schools worldwide. The reason this graph is important to me is when I turn on the news, it seems like the majority of the information is not positive. In fact, it's negative. Most of it's about murder, corruption, diseases, natural disasters, and very quickly, my brain starts to think that's the accurate ratio of negative to positive in the world. What that's doing is creating something called the medical school syndrome, which if you know people who have been to medical school during the first year of medical training, as you read through a list of all the symptoms and diseases that could happen, suddenly you realize you have all of them. I have a brother-in-law named Bobo, which is a whole other story. Bobo married Amy the unicorn. Bobo called me on the phone from Yale Medical School. And Bobo said, Sean, I have leprosy. Which even at Yale is extraordinarily rare. But I had no idea how to console poor Bobo because he had just gotten over an entire week of menopause. See, what we're finding is not necessarily the reality that shapes us, but the lens through which your brain views the world that shapes your reality. And if we can change the lens, not only can we change your happiness, we can change every single educational and business outcome at the same time. When I applied to Harvard, I applied on a dare. I didn't expect to get in, and my family had no money for college. When I got a military scholarship 2 weeks later, they allowed me to go. Suddenly, something that wasn't even a possibility became a reality. When I went there, I assumed everyone else would see it as a privilege as well, that they'd be excited to be there. Even if you're in a classroom full of people smarter than you, you'd be happy just to be in that classroom, which is what I felt. But what I found there is while some people experienced that, when I graduated after my 4 years and then spent the next 8 years living in the dorms with the students, Harvard asked me to, wasn't that guy. But what happened I was an officer at Harvard to counsel students through the difficult 4 years. And what I found in my research, my teaching, is that these students, no matter how happy they were with their original success of getting into the school, 2 weeks later, their brains were focused not on the privilege of being there, nor on their philosophy or their physics. Their brain was focused on the competition, the workload, the hassles, the stresses, the complaints. When I first went in there, I walked into the freshman dining hall, which is where my friends from Waco, Texas, which is where I grew up. I know some of you have heard of it. When they come to visit me, they look around, they say, this freshman dining hall looks like something out of Hogwarts from the movie Harry Potter, which it does. This is Hogwarts from the movie Harry Potter, and that's Harvard. And when they see this, they say, Sean, why do you waste your time studying happiness at Harvard? Seriously, what does a Harvard student possibly have to be unhappy about? Embedded within that question is the key to understanding the science of happiness, because what that question assumes is that our external world is predictive of our happiness levels, when in reality, if I know everything about your external world, I can only predict 10% of your long-term happiness. 90% of your long-term happiness is predicted not by the external world, but by the way your brain processes the world. And if we change it, if we change our formula for happiness and success, what we can do is change the way that we can then affect reality. What we found is that only 25% of job successes are predicted by IQ. 75% of job successes are predicted by your optimism levels, your social support, and your ability to see stress as a challenge instead of as a threat. I talked to a boarding school up in New England, probably the most prestigious boarding school, and they said, we already know that. So every year, instead of just teaching our students, we also have a wellness week, and we're so excited. Monday night, we have the world's leading expert coming in to speak about adolescent depression. Tuesday night is school violence and bullying. Wednesday night is eating disorders. Thursday night is illicit drug use. And Friday night, we're trying to decide between risky sex or happiness. I said that's most people's Friday nights. Which I'm glad you liked, but they did not like that at all. Silence on the phone. And into the silence, I said, I'd be happy to speak at your school, but just, that's not a wellness week. That's a sickness week. What you've done is you've outlined all the negative things that can happen, but not talked about the positive. The absence of disease is not health. Here's how we get to health. We need to reverse the formula for happiness and success. In the past 3 years, I've traveled to 45 different countries, working with schools and companies in the midst of an economic downturn. And what I found is that most companies and schools follow a formula for success, which is this: if I work harder, I'll be more successful. And if I'm more successful, then I'll be happier. That undergirds most of our parenting styles, our managing styles, the way that we motivate our behavior. And the problem is it's scientifically broken and backwards for 2 reasons. First, every time your brain has a success, you just change the goalpost of what success looked like. You got good grades, now you have to get better grades. You got into a good school, now you have to get a better school. You got a good job, now you have to get a better job. You hit your sales target, we're going to change your sales target. And if happiness is on the opposite side of success, your brain never gets there. What we've done is we pushed happiness over the cognitive horizon as a society. And that's because we think we have to be successful, then we'll be happier. But the real problem is our brains work in the opposite order. If you can raise somebody's level of positivity in the present, then their brain experiences what we now call a happiness advantage, which is your brain at positive performs significantly better than it does at negative, neutral, or stressed. Your intelligence rises, your creativity rises, your energy levels rise. In fact, what we found is that every single business outcome improves. Your brain at positive is 31% more productive than your brain at negative, neutral, or stressed. You're 37% better at sales. Doctors are 19% faster, more accurate at coming up with the correct diagnosis when positive instead of negative, neutral, or stressed, which means we can reverse the formula. If we can find a way of becoming positive in the present, then our brains work even more successfully as we're able to work harder, faster, and more intelligently. What we need to be able to do is to reverse this formula so we can start to see what our brains are actually capable of. Because dopamine, which floods into your system when you're positive, has 2 functions. Not only does it make you happier, it turns on all of the learning centers in your brain, allowing you to adapt to the world in a different way. We found that there are ways you can train your brain to be able to become more positive. In just a 2-minute span of time, done for 21 days in a row, we can actually rewire your brain, allowing your brain to actually work more optimistically and more successfully. We've done these things in research now in every single company that I've worked with, getting them to write down 3 new things that they're grateful for 21 days in a row, 3 new things each day. And at the end of that, their brain starts to retain a pattern of scanning the world, not for the negative, but for the positive first. Journaling about 1 positive experience you've had over the past 24 hours allows your brain to relive it. Exercise teaches your brain that your behavior matters. We find that meditation allows your brain to get over the cultural ADHD that we've been creating by trying to do multiple tasks at once, allows our brains to focus on the task at hand. And finally, random acts of kindness or conscious acts of kindness. We get people when they open up their inbox to write one positive email praising or thanking somebody in their social support network. And by doing these activities and by training your brain, just like we train our bodies, what we found is we can reverse the formula for happiness and success. And in doing so, not only create ripples of positivity, but create a real revolution. Thank you very much.
Anyway, your thoughts. I know that's a little longer than a video I usually use in one of these, but yeah, Megan's, you want your kids. I like that. I hope you saw that the 5. I'm gonna go over those again here in a minute because I think it's worth repeating and challenging you to follow that. But I'd love to get your comments on what stood out to you about how it relates to this topic from what he just talked about. What are some of the ways that we can use our thinking, our ability to embrace a new type of thinking pattern to be happy and to enjoy our jobs? Anything that stands out for you guys? I'm going to share a couple of my thoughts, but I'd love to hear kind of what stood out to you. What kind of maybe made a difference? 90% of your happiness is determined by your internal environment, not your external situation. And that's true. Isn't that interesting, right? We can only predict as much about 10% of your happiness based on your wealth, your family's situation, all those things. It really comes from within. And that normally is merely average is one of the quotes that he likes, right? That we don't just seek for average. And think about a positive moment, reflect on that. He talked about dopamine being we all know that dopamine is the happy drug. It's the thing that's unlocked when we take medications to block pain. It's where we get our little boost in our happiness. It comes from that chemical in our brain. And how he said something about that it doesn't just, when we have this orientation that I'll be happy when, we don't get the dopamine until, but he says the problem with that is dopamine isn't just the thing that gives you the happiness. As Brianna said, it turns on your learning centers, right? That the same thing, that same drug turns on, and we learn better when we're happy. And so why wait, right? And so I find that really interesting. I like a lot of things that he said about how to do that we don't keep moving the goalpost over happiness. Teaching piano lessons is such a long-term result for a child to stay motivated through finding positivity in the here and now, enjoying the little successes. Yeah. I mean, if you're not happy till you're playing Chopin, whatever, right? You're struggling for a long time. It's like, yes, I'm getting better at chopsticks, and then I'm learning new things, enjoying the process, and not just waiting until you're an amazing piano player. And he is a good speaker, as James said. He's entertaining. I like his stories. But so let's talk about those 5 things, and I just challenge you to each give some thought to that for 21 days. And 21 days was chosen because 21 days is what it takes to create a new habit, to at least give it that pathway that you can then kind of run with it. One of them, and I don't know if I'll get the particular order, and I'm hopeful I'll get 5 here off of memory, but one of them was exercise. And that might be the one that takes the longest out of all of these, but there's just too much that tells us how important this is. I mean, studies show that 47% reduction of depression symptoms from just walking 20 to 30 minutes a day. So exercise, and it doesn't have to be marathons. If you're there, that's great, but it can be walking. It can be just wherever you are, exercise with what you've got. And then the others can be a little faster. One of them is write down 3 new things you're grateful for every day. Now, day 1, 3 things probably hopefully isn't too hard, but by day 21, you got to think of something you haven't already said before. So as he said, that makes you scan the environment for things that you're grateful for. And gratitude is proven over and over again to be one of the best ways to build our resilience, to build a good inner culture. Someone was talking about, hey, I was reading some of the comments, and if I'm working on Zoom and stuff, culture becomes a little less, part of your daily life. So you got to really work then on building a good inner culture, because there's no one else to to give that to you. You gotta, that's all in here, right? A lot of the time. So then that way you talk to yourself, and that's something I emphasize a lot with my son who's 14. And I'm like, it probably makes me a weird parent. I'm as a counselor. A lot of parents ask a lot of funny questions to their kids, but the one I ask a lot is, how do you talk to yourself? Are you being fair? What are the ways what are the thoughts that you give yourself? What are you planting, and how do you talk to yourself is kind of how I say it. And I think that's an important thing and by having gratitude, we actually create those positive thoughts. So these are things I'm grateful for in my life. And there's always something, even no matter what you're going through, there's always things you can find. And then the other one was to do a little more extensive in writing a gratitude journal about one thing, and giving it a lot more thought. Then you talked about kind of something I alluded to earlier, which is do a random act of kindness or a planned act of kindness. Open up your email and pick somebody and send them a message or something. And then he talked about, did I hit 5 yet? Seems like I'm missing one. Oh, meditation. Thank you, Ashley. Meditation, some way, and this is so important nowadays in our life of just the chaos of social media and everything, that there's noise everywhere we go. I can relate to the Grinch and the Grinch Stole Christmas when he's like, noise. Like that's what life becomes. And I think when we can just tune out the noise, we need to sit with our own minds and just the quiet green space and whatever. So yes, meditation in whatever form works for you. It could be a prayerful meditation if you're a religious, spiritual person, you're connecting to a higher being. It could be just connecting to nature or your surrounding. I like the 5-4-3-2-1 method. It's very simple. It's a matter of just sitting where you are and using your senses. I have I look at 5 things with my eyeballs and I experience them. I see them, and I really, like a child playing lava, if the floor is lava, like you're really experiencing it, looking at things. 4 things you can hear and you listen to them. You don't just name them, you listen. 3 things you can touch and you touch them and you feel, oh, my computer's getting a little bit warm, or this coolness of this desk, right? 2 things you can smell and actually smell them. Now it gets a little weird if people are watching. You're like, what's going on? Right? And then 1 thing you can taste, and like my hand or get a piece of gum or something, right? And you're connecting to your senses. Then you can start all over again if you need to. But that's one very mindful strategy you can use. This something he kind of alluded to, and I really like to kind of think a lot about, is this idea of expectations versus hopes. And depending on your upbringing and the ways that you talk to yourself, we sometimes create these really, really high expectations. But when you define expectation as something that must be present, then the payoff is minimal. I expect, if I say to my 14-year-old, I expect, because he's smart enough, he's proven he can do it, straight A's, nothing lower than A's. That becomes my expectation. Then his and my inner experience when he gets A's is, of course you did. That's an expectation. You just do it. Like, I'm not going to thank you for not punching me in the face when I walked in the room today, because I expect you not to punch me in the face. So why would I thank you for not punching me in the face when I walked in the room today? I know I have weird examples, bear with me, but hopefully they make the point. Thank you for not punching me in the face. It'd be a weird thing to say to someone when you walk in the room, but I do expect that, and I'm not going to thank you when you don't do it, when you don't punch me. But and those are fair expectations. You should have some expectations. Like, I really should expect my son to give his best at school. He's capable. He should give his best. But maybe the expectation doesn't have to be the outcome of the straight A's. It can be just, I expect you to turn things in on time and do your best. Then that leaves room, and we assume sometimes, well, if my expectations aren't straight A's, then he'll settle for B's, and then he'll never become his best self. And I say, that's not how that works. And in fact, you will encourage better grades and more innovation and more real connection to school and really seeking to your best when you have better motivation than just meeting an expectation. You will, when you have hopes and dreams and things that are associated. So expectations, hopes. I believe in you, son. I know you can get straight A's. I've seen you do it. I have hopes that you can do that. I expect you to do this. This is what I hope for. And that space between our expectations and our hopes is our reward space. Like, we feel good about what we did do above and beyond what was expected. I'll give you another example that I think really drives that home. If I'm in myself failing in my fitness and I've gained some weight, not feeling great about that, and I drive home, and on the way home, I see somebody running and they're fit. And I'm like, oh, Darren, you're such a loser. Look at you. You probably could have walked from the store. And here you are driving. They're running. You put on some weight. You're not being very healthy. You're tired. God, you're just, I could talk negatively to myself. You're failing. And I'm like, I gotta do better. I expect to do better. So I push myself. And I use that negative talk and the expectation to go and run the next day. Okay. Some of you can relate to this conversation I just had with myself, that I've really had with myself. And I go out and I run. And what's my reward? My reward is I get back to not being a loser, whatever I told myself. I'm no longer a loser. Okay. I filled the hole that I'm feeling in myself by doing the thing I expect myself to do. But that's my reward. That's it. That's called coercive motivation. I'm motivated to get back to being an okay person. I'm all right with myself. That's it. But if I can find a deeper, better, more meaningful purpose, now maybe it does start with the spark plug. I say that guilt and fear are a good spark plug, but not a good fuel. Like that sparks me, like that moment where I'm like, dang it, Darren, you're better than this. Can be a good like little kick in the pants, but don't keep kicking, man. That after a while, that's not working. The first kick was helpful. After that, I got to find something better that's more motivating. And that comes from Darren, when you do run, you just remember how you feel more energy, you fit better in your clothes, you just feel like you're just alive, you feel good about yourself. All these things are there. Like I'm creating a reward sequence. I'm giving myself bigger ideals for what I want to create. So now when I get up the next morning and I go running, I have opened myself up to a whole bigger reward structure. And instead of just getting back to even, I've created a positive, a better system for keeping me on target. So that's where I think hopes come in, and we create that. So how you talk to yourself, it's not just your behaviors. Running is the behavior, but it's how and why and what you tell yourself about it that makes all the difference. And that's true for every activity at work that you do. It's not just that you do your work and expect to have the same payoff that somebody else gets. You may be missing out on the payoff of your job because you don't have the right structure, the right framework, the right scaffolding to build this wonderful thing that you're envisioning that will be because of what you do. So again, and everything you do, even if you're the most remote person on Zoom, relationships still matter, right? We have to build them, and it might be a different way you do it, but building relationships is a big part of how we succeed in our jobs. And so if you're struggling in those ways, then that's something you want to further develop, is how do you do that? How do you create those better relationships? I talked about these ideas of coercive motivation. What I was referring to is constructive motivation, which is, again, building. It's taking from the ground up, not just from the depths of a hole up to level surface. That's true for motivating others. Okay, I talked about that in terms of motivating myself, but if it works on myself, it's also true for others. I can have this fear-based, and studies, if you remember your basic studies in Psych 101, in rat studies, it showed that the rats who were the quickest to get to the end of the maze were the ones that they zapped and punished. That tells us that punishment can be more effective than reward. But here's the kicker. Those rats didn't learn a dang thing. They didn't learn the maze. They just wait to get zapped and then they move. And they move quickly because they're motivated. But they don't learn a dang thing. So the second you get rid of, and you're not there to zap them, and by the way, even after zapping them for a while, they just eventually just go, whatever, just keep, and they just give up. They give up. So it only works for a little while, but it works really well, which is why we do it as leaders, as parents. We sometimes like, oh man, it really works for a little while. But that's short-sighted, because what really works in the long term is to get them to fall in love with the maze. Because this law of association is that they associate the zap with, move, but they also associate with the maze because they're in the maze when it happens. So the maze becomes a toxic, ugly place. So if your employees or you are in a work where there's a lot of negativity and you think that negativity is going to drive them down the maze, well, guess what? Even if they get there, this maze became really associated with negativity. And even if you leave, it's a negative maze. And that's how the rats feel. They don't like it. Left alone, they don't want to play with the maze because the maze became a dark place for them. So, but the rats who are rewarded through cheese and reward, they eventually get to a place where, like, I don't care if there's cheese or not. I like the maze. It's fun. It became associated with fun, right? So you give them cheese, give them the maze, give them success. All those become part of the same thing. Next thing you know, you have a positive course association with all of that. And as said here, that part of that environment is your peers. And someone said, what if you're outnumbered by negative peers? And that's a really good question, Laura, right? When you're outnumbered and it's like, they feel like the math is against me. And I'd say that can be very difficult, right? But sometimes what you have to do is not let the math define you. You can decide yourself, as Viktor Frankl said, who was in the worst military camp ever, unfortunately, the concentration camp, when he was, if you read The Man's Search for Meaning, for Happiness, Meaning, there's two books that I wrote now. I'm blown away. Which one was it? Man's Search for Meaning, right? The one that he wrote. And he talked about how he was able to find this inner peace in that situation as a prisoner in a concentration camp. We can find it even in our own cells without other people enlisting. Last thing I'm going to share, as we're out of time, is this book by Andy Andrews, not Annie. The Traveler's Gift is a cool book. It's a very easy read if you like one of those easy reads that are more entertaining and just easy. And these are the 7 decisions for success. And I like where it starts with the buck stops here, and that is stop blaming everybody else for your misery. Take responsibility. Number 1. I love it. And that just takes off from there. I will seek wisdom. I am a person of action. I have a decided heart. Today I will choose to be happy. I will greet this day with a forgiving spirit. And I will persist without exception. I love it. It's good material. It's kind of that locker room speech I need sometimes with that kind of talk. And I think those affirmations can be helpful. I used to mock that when I was younger, watch that live with Stuart Small, and I saying, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and God darn it, people like me. Kind of silly, but I really actually believe in that stuff. I actually have my own little vision board thing I play myself every day, twice a day. It's kind of written that way. It's like, this is what I'm about. This is who I am. This is how I talk to myself. And I think those can be very helpful things. And these are some of the decisions for success that you kind of repeat back to yourself daily. Thank you for your time with me today. And I hope that today, before you leave, that you will take away at least 1 or 2 things. If it's not those 5 things that you make your 21-day challenge, or something to say, I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it in action to make a difference and make myself make the most of my job and feel like I'm falling in love again with this job that I do. And I wish you the best, and let us be a part of that process if you need help.